here in this session. So the content that I've got for you really covers 6 areas. We're going to talk about why it's important that before you go and build fancy agentic GTM flows, you get your data into an excellent place. And I'll try to give you some examples of what I consider to be best in class data quality in a CRM. And I'll go through a couple areas that lead to that data quality. So first of all, firmographics, the basic company information, but in many cases, more detailed company information specific to how you sell and what your ICP is, and making sure that's filled in. How waterfalls have kind of impacted the ability of companies to get data quality that is in the 90-95% range with fill rates. How technographics have become increasingly sophisticated and precise. And then, of course, talking about signals, a lot of people's favorite sort of a thing to reach for when it comes to prospecting or to measuring top of funnel. And then AI data points, this is a Clay specialty. This is where you're actually using agents to go out and fill in data and collect unique and interesting data points. Finally, it wouldn't be a discussion of Clay without talking about global data coverage. And for those of you on the call that are operating businesses that span countries and continents, getting your global data coverage right is actually sort of an additional layer on top of making sure that your coverage is sound in the kind of primary market that you operate in. So with that, we'll get into this, and this should be super interesting. We'd love to hear questions that folks have in the chat, and we will answer those at the end. So starting off here, a lot of you are probably familiar with a page in your CRM that looks like this, and I have to give credit to my friend Jen from Go Nimbly for this idea, but there's not a lot of action that you can take when you open a page like this. This is someone's email, it's their title maybe, it's maybe where the lead came from, but there's actually almost nothing that you can go off of here that you can use to build a true agentic workflow. And so the challenge for folks that are investing in this is to turn a page that looks like this in their CRM into a page that looks like this. So this is actually a screenshot from Clay's CRM. This is I believe this is Datadog, if I'm not mistaken. And you see a lot more very rich detail on a page like this. Actually, every page in Clay's CRM looks like this, whether it's a contact or an opportunity or an account. A good barometer for high quality data is that there's not a lot of white space in your CRM. You have things filled in a way that means that there's almost too much information for a human to consume, but that's the level of information that's helpful for agents and for AI workflows to be able to work off of. So what I want to go through in this session are a couple of techniques that are going to help you get to this level of detail and richness in your CRM, and then hopefully we'll show you how to actually go through and do that. So what is Clay and what have we been up to? So Clay is a data marketplace, and that means it's a place where you can not only integrate with different tools, but you can actually purchase data from different data providers. And so what that means is that instead of buying flat files from 1 or 2 or 3 people, you can buy data from 50 people all at the same time in the same workflow. And this is important because the only way to kind of get to the 90th, 95th percentile data coverage within your CRM is to be able to fill in the gaps when you're, for example, prospecting in Australia, or when you're going after SMBs, or when you need niche data points that are only available in commercial real estate data sets. I could go on and on about the different types of data that I see customers use, but you need almost a marketplace where you can kind of select data in bits and pieces and integrate it into your flows. And so that's what Clay makes available to folks. Today, we're adding about 2 integrations per week. And so we're right at about 150 today and on pace to cross kind of 200, I think, in the next few months. And so where you get your data actually starts to matter less if you're able to access all the data sources in the world through one place. And so what that means then is you can, when you are considering what firmographics look like for a company, you can actually build something out that gets to the level of richness that someone that's prospecting or someone that's researching an account would be able to get to. And so here what we have is a prompt that is looking at information that is much beyond the sort of employee count or revenue data or some of the industry fields that you might have filled in. this is a richness to the data that you should be able to achieve in your CRM, going from a place where you might have 60% coverage on employee counts, and many of them are on, to having actually like qualitative measures of how good this company is in your CRM. One way to do this is with waterfalls. And so waterfalling is a technique that allows you to look up data in multiple providers all at the same time. And so instead of making a call to ZoomInfo and then maybe making a call to Cognizant, you can intelligently sort through the data that you have across sometimes 20 providers all at the same time. And whether or not you do this through Clay, waterfalling is sort of the modern way to ensure that you have high quality data. And a lot of companies that we talk to are actually already operating waterfalls themselves. The trick is that data quality is always changing. It's not a static adventure. You need to kind of be able to consistently swap in and out data providers or address data challenges that come up within your organization. And so, for example, you might have folks that face an issue where some new regulation is passed in some region. And that means that for a while you see a dip in data quality for a particular set of fields. Maybe you suddenly get a bunch of phone numbers that used to be filled in. Those phone numbers are now labeled as DNC or something like that. That might mean that you need to actually adjust your data acquisition strategy kind of on the fly. And so the mistake that I see a lot of companies make is they will build sort of a custom waterfall when they first stand up their CRM. But then they will not really have an ability to rapidly change and test the data within that waterfall. And that's sort of the setup that I think is actually necessary to kind of keep pace with data quality that you need to support these agentic workflows. And so a couple of tricks for waterfalls are to, one, make sure that you are not only grabbing data from different folks, but you're also validating the data at the same time. So particularly for emails and phone numbers, really important to be pulling data from a data provider and then running a separate validator on that data to, for example, ping the inbox to see if it exists. Another thing that you can do with waterfalls is the default mode is to sort of operate them in a way where the first data set that gets successfully returned is the one that gets pulled. I actually see a lot of companies operate more complex logic within their waterfalls. So for example, for employee count, you might actually pull 2 or 3 employee counts and take the average or the median of the employee counts that you get. For phone numbers, you might pull 2 or 3 phone numbers and make all of them available in your CRM and then send all of them through a power dialer that the like Nooks or Orem that the rep is using. And so waterfalling is it's a simple concept. It's a way to look up data in multiple data providers all at the same time. But the way that you leverage it within your CRM, the way that you tune into your business is super important. The next thing I want to go through here is technographics. And so firmographics sort of describe what the company is and what they do. Technographics describe actually what the company's technology stack looks like. And so for most of us that are in the SaaS industry, or folks selling software, or folks selling services that operate on specific software, if you understand what type of technology is in use within that organization, that makes it a lot easier to go in and kind of prospect them successfully. And so there's technology out there that will, for example, visit someone's website and say, okay, they use this particular data provider, or they use that particular form fill solution. But that's a very rough approximation of what a company's tech stack looks like. The very best technographics on the market are actually able to give you a look at what the back office software that a company uses looks like. And then they're actually able to then link that to, for example, a renewal date or a first detected date, or link it to deeper context around who or what group within the organization bought that software and stood it up. In fact, in many cases, these technographic providers will have information like the actual amount of spend that might be allocated to that software, or a rough approximation of the budget that is being used. And so within Clay, there's a couple different data providers that you can use for this, but one that we favor is HG Insights. And so they have data coverage, for example, for 99% or so of the kind of like IT spend in the world. And so not only things like which payment processor do we use and so forth, but things like which ERP is in use, which kind of back office database is in use. And within that data, they can actually tell you things like I said, when that technology was first kind of purchased by that company, and then you can use that to actually inform your prospecting. And so what I used to do before I joined Clay was I would go out and find Datadog customers and prospect into those companies, because my former company offered a solution that helped people save money on Datadog. That's the kind of a rich technographics that you can marry with other data from Clay. The other thing that's really useful when you have a strong technographic provider is that you can do list building in a much easier way. And so not only core enrichment tasks that you're running in your CRM, but also the ability to kind of build one-off campaigns that you can use. And so Clay is actually a company that benefits tremendously from this. We are constantly adding new integrations. And so, for example, when we added Marketo as an integration to Clay a couple of months ago, we built a list of every company that we could find that was using Marketo, and we got in touch with them about the fact that Marketo was now available in Clay. So you can leverage not only the technographics for keeping your kind of account scores and things up to date, but you can leverage it for campaigns as well. Okay, so we've gone through a couple of the basics. Now we're getting actually into some of the more advanced territory, and this is really when you start talking about signals and intent. These are, unlike some of the static data points that I was just referencing, these are dynamic data points. So these are things that are constantly changing, and many companies are going to be setting up actually alerting infrastructure to take action when something changes. Classic example of this, of course, is job changers. So you have a champion that bought your software at a current customer. They move to a net new prospect that does not have your software. You get an alert. That's typically one of the easier types of campaigns that you can run. However, there's a lot of people that are able to run job changers campaigns. And so the key with signals is to actually be able to combine signals together in a way that allows you to have a unique signal that is unique to your company that you can use within your CRM. And so one of the ways that folks do that in Clay is they will actually, for example, combine website intent with job changers with a signal that tracks a change on a website. And all those things have to be true in order for them to actually generate a signal to prospect into that account. That's important because if you're simply spamming people every time they change their job, or you don't understand some of the deeper context around why you're reaching out to the company, then you are not as able to kind of effectively prospect. And so what that means for practitioners of this is that you need a system which is able to sort of track and aggregate signals over time. And it might take you months actually of monitoring different accounts for there to be enough signal for you to go in and prospect. So I wanted to offer a couple different types of signals that folks are using. These are some of the main ones that I see in the market, and you can do a lot with only using these. However, you can also now build custom signals which are much more finely tuned to the type of product that you might be selling. And so a couple examples of this. For example, you might say that a company is looking for an OSHA violation, or you might say that that you're looking for folks that have raised money, but you actually don't care about everyone that's raised money. You're looking for people that have raised money from these investors. Or you might be looking for people that are visiting your website and de-anonymizing them, but you might not actually care about that until someone visits this sequence of pages in this order. And so the signals-based scoring and the ability to leverage custom signals within your systems that you're utilizing, that's actually a key unlock to being able to kind of effectively go after folks and effectively populate your CRM. Another great signal that gets overlooked is actually the first party data that you have. So particularly if your product is usage-based, if you have a PLG motion, if you have an ability for people to self-serve onto your platform at all, that itself is a signal that you can leverage. It doesn't have to come from third-party data. So at Clay, for example, we look for folks that are, of course, signing up for the product, but really what we look for is for them to start using a certain amount of credits. That to us is an indication that those folks are beyond the exploring phase with Clay, and they're actually ready to potentially have a conversation with us. Another great signal that that we like to leverage is something like gone data or call transcript data. And so every time you're out there taking calls with prospects, you might be learning things as a company that are recorded in the transcript, but are not ever acted on by anyone else at the company. So we, for example, collect a lot of competitive intelligence about other kind of sales intelligence tools and what people are doing with them. And we have almost built our own view of what tools are in use in the market purely from call transcript data. And so this is a data source that is a gold mine that most companies are pretty adept at recording all their calls these days, but oftentimes the data itself is not structured in any way that would be useful inside of a CRM. Okay, so last kind of data point area that I want to go through here is custom AI data points. And so I'll tell a couple stories of data points that I've seen in use in the market, and hopefully this will get people's wheels spinning a little bit. But one of my favorite ones is a company called Waste Management. They do waste disposal, and they have a unique thing with their brand where they have these green and yellow dumpsters that they use kind of in all of their customers. And so one of the ways that their reps would go ahead and detect if a potential small business was a potential net new customer for them was they would actually go on Google Street View and look at the color of the dumpster. And if it wasn't green, then they would know that that is like a new prospect that they can go after. And so with Clay, we actually created an agent that would go and use a web browser and go visit the sort of Google Street View locations of hundreds of thousands of businesses across the country, rate the color of their dumpsters, and then actually determine, is this a net new potential prospect for Waste Management? And so that's pretty interesting because that's a unique advantage that only they have, and it's the type of data point that only an AI can go and get for you. Another one that I like, this is more of a TAM sourcing use case, but there's a health tech customer out there that they charge based on the number of hospital beds in a facility, and that they do something a little bit more advanced. They look at occupancy rates and so forth. But for them, it's not enough to kind of know how many people work at a facility. They actually have to understand how many beds does the facility have. And so they built an agent in Clay that goes out and ranks all the hospitals in North America based on the number of beds in that hospital. And then you can imagine that's kind of a structured field that gets filled in their CRM. And so that's a way that you can set up account scoring to go far beyond some of the base data that you might be doing, the firmographics and the technographics, and get into things that are very specific to your own company. A couple more rapid fire examples of this. I won't go through all of these, and we'll make these slides available after the fact. But Intercom is a Clay customer that is looking for a richness of documentation and FAQ sites within their prospects, and they need that because their agent is sort of able to train on those documentation sites, and their customer support agent works the best when a company already has a fairly rich set of documentation. Prospects that don't have that probably need to use some of Intercom's other products to build that out first before they can leverage some of the AI tools. Yeah, I mentioned the OSHA violation thing first, but there's a lot of interesting RSS feeds out there that folks can access and sort through. I see this a lot with kind of like Form D filings or things like this, where a company is actually looking for a sort of like a random feed, OSHA violations. I've got a customer looking at FAA violations. A lot of this information is published by governments and by different organizations, but it just sort of sits on the internet and it's not consumed by any system that is potentially going to leverage it for prospecting and for enrichment. And so I always like to ask customers the question, what is unique about your business and what do your best reps kind of know about a customer that makes them a great fit? And in a lot of cases, there's an ability to build a data point that will capture that information and do it in a systematic and structured way. And that's kind of a unique capability that is available because of AI and was not available 3 or 4 years ago when we didn't have technology like this. I talked a little bit about competitive analysis. Pulling the data from the GONE transcript is one thing, but the thing that I think folks miss is you can go way, way beyond just knowing who the competitor is and so forth. At Clay, for example, we get the pricing information, we get product gaps, we get renewal dates, we get a lot of the sort of deeper context around what's happening in the calls that our team is doing. And then we structure that within our CRM so that we can easily reference that. When we launch features that go after competitors, we can sort of easily run campaigns against them. And so the kind of pre-work to build this out means that marketing teams sort of in the future can benefit from that. Okay, last thing I'll go through here for you, and then we'll pop over into a little bit of a live demo of Clay. But I think it gets a little bit maybe not talked about enough how important it is to not only ensure that you have good coverage for North America, but also that you have good coverage across the globe. And so I've spent a lot of time with customers testing data providers and testing data in various different regions. Give you a quick example, Firmable in Australia, 10 million Australian contacts, million businesses, phone numbers, emails, really rich local data set that is available in Clay. And so what that means is that for customers, instead of needing to go through procurement cycles and quality testing and integration work and so forth, if you've already got your waterfalls set up to enrich contacts, source contacts, and connect them to your CRM, it's simply a matter of kind of clicking add provider within Clay to be able to add high quality global data coverage to your CRM. And if you're already able to prospect in one region and you're moving into another region, quickly being able to kind of like test and see what works in that region is a really key ability. And I don't necessarily think it's really just kind of like a non-AI, just sort of like blocking and tackling type workflow that is important for folks to get right. The other thing with global data quality is, you know, you're gonna get differences between all the regions. There's kind of an absolute difference between the number of phone numbers and emails that are known about in North America versus Southeast Asia, for example. But that's okay, because for competitors in the region or others in the region that are going after those same customers, if you're able to achieve best-in-class data quality there, it still means that relative to everybody else that's in that region, you're able to achieve good results. And so global data quality is kind of not to be forgotten. That's one of my favorite things to work on with customers. And so with all that as a precursor, I'd like to now invite my colleague Andrew up onto the stage to share a little bit of Clay Live and show you all kind of how this system works and what the interface looks like in case you haven't seen it before. And so Andrew, please join us, and excited to see what you have for us.
All right. Thank you, Everett. Hello, everyone. I'm Andrew. I'm a GTM engineer on Everett's team. I don't have the privilege of being in Europe right now, but that does mean I have better Wi-Fi, so can share my screen and video. Let me pull Clay up and just walk through a table from scratch. All right, screen. All right, so ultimately, like if this is your first time seeing Clay, you can kind of think of the way we put data in it similar to how you put data in really any table. So you got your companies and the rows and all the data points, both signals, AI data points, so on, in the columns. Kind of starting from just even the less exciting but really core data points, we're getting clean and valid domain here. Now, again, it's not the world's most exciting data point, but it's really important because if you think about like, how do I reconcile accounts in my CRM and how do I match those accounts in other databases, having a clean domain is absolutely essential. And you'd be shocked how many enterprise companies we work with where this is a massive problem with them, with incorrect domains, poorly formatted domains, even domains that are completely inactive and are parts of companies that went out of business or acquired. And, this is a problem for them and has a lot of downstream effects. So that's always what we start with. We get that domain. This is an example of a waterfall here that Everett was mentioning, using several providers. And then we validate that domain often using AI to make sure it's still active and it's correct. Now, stemming from there, we're going to start enriching the company with core firmographics. This is going to be all like the hits that you're going to use to populate your CRM, probably score and segment accounts, route different accounts to leads. So if I go in here, you can see this gives me what is the size of the company, what is the headquarter and region that the company operates in, all the different office locations, what is the industry description, so on. So again, fairly simple data points, but really critical to actually like segmenting in your CRM and taking a lot of action on after. This type of data is also great to feed to an AI agent for context later in the workflow. So again, Clay is really good at, not just some of the more creative data points, but some of the just core data points that are going to precede some of the more creative use cases and getting you really strong coverage. Typically with Clay, since, ultimately we're using one provider here, but if we needed to, we could layer on, Clearbit, we could layer on an AI search. We're able to get really high coverage on these kind of key data points here. And then we're moving into like data points that I would, touch both signals and really more like specific data points that are key qualifiers and indicators for fit for ICP. Some of these many companies with their current solutions aren't able to get. So the kind of the context behind this table is that it's built kind of as if you were a cybersecurity company. And a key criteria would be, what is the current size of their cybersecurity team? As kind of like how many buyers essentially are in our buyer group there. And then do they have growth on the security team, indicating a signal, if you will, that they're prioritizing this. So that's what we're pulling here, the current security roles, 12-month security. These filters are highly flexible too. I mean, this is a pretty simple one, as you can see, but you can really drill down into this with more keywords, seniority levels, start and end dates, locations, etc., to get pretty much as granular as any sales rep would get doing this in Sales Nav, what have you. So an example of this used later on, the same enrichment, just with different filters, is let's look if they're hiring CISO or CIO security executives as a signal that this is, initiative to improve the security measures, so on, so on. All right, so another thing I wanted to touch on is this verified technology usage. So Everett talked a bunch about HG Insights and kind of the quality and granularity of data that we can get there. There's so many ways you can do this in this, or it's leverage this sort of data. In this case, it's kind of a way to measure fit in terms of compatibility with tech stack. I'm looking at things like Kubernetes, Okta, et cetera. You could also use this as a competitive takeout play. So let's build a list of my competitors by technology and then actually target them. So a lot of different options for using technographic data. To Everett's point, you can get really specific and granular data here from HG Insights. They really kind of provide a lot of color beyond just the product name. I can see what exactly specific category are they on, and I can filter by that in the enrichment as well. When was the last verification date? What is like the density with which we've identified this? So it's not just a broad umbrella, we detected XYZ. You can really drill into specific parts of that tech and verticals of the product within your customers and prospects. All right, so this is the first example of what I'd consider an AI data point. So in this case, we're looking at like what types of certifications does this company currently have? And this is not something, if I went into a traditional data provider, I would find as a structured data point. It's on websites, it's on people's security portals, etc. And a good rep will often do this kind of research manually, and they'll find this out and they'll kind of store it in their own notes. Maybe they'll put it in the CRM, but probably not. And then realistically, most of the other reps are not looking at this stuff at all. So I would say just the top reps are even doing this research, and it's time consuming, and then everyone else is not really even doing it at all. And it's certainly not consistently getting into your CRM. Well, you don't have to make that trade-off anymore. Using Clayagent, you can get all these unstructured data points and turn them into structured data points, essentially actionable business insights, if you will, and use that to populate your CRM cleanly and score accounts in ways that you couldn't score them before. So let's let's actually take a look at how we did this. So if I go in here, you can write a custom prompt. Very similar to how you write a custom prompt in Perplexity, ChatGPT, except this runs programmatically. So if I put 10,000 accounts in here, this prompt is going to run for all 10,000 of them. So it scales really well and ensures kind of consistency in the outputs. Now, there's also a ton of visibility into Clay's AI agent, ClayAgent. A common piece of feedback we get with like AI data points is, if it doesn't get the right answer, there's kind of no way to trace back what's happening, right? QA it, make improvements. This is really giving you all the steps taken. It's giving you the confidence level, a blurb on reasoning. So when you're refining this initial workflow before I roll it out to my entire CRM, I can really dial it in, see what's happening under the hood to make sure it's operating right before I, am comfortable enough doing this across the board to tens, hundreds of thousands of accounts. This is great for, writing messaging as well, when you can really see what's happening under the hood and make adjustments. So that's one example of an AI data point. A couple other examples here are like, give me a little bit of color about their cybersecurity, their current cybersecurity practices, and let me know if there's any security breaches, recent security breaches. Now, this I would even classify as a signal, this security breach here, which you could use to inform the timing and personalization of outreach. So a lot of these other things we've covered before are more static data points. You might refresh them, a couple times a year, something like revenue headcount. For these signals, these are things that now I'm setting up Clay to run on a schedule and enrich and refresh constantly, because I want to identify areas that could be like inciting events for me to reach out these signals in real time. So this security breach news is a perfect example of something I would rerun on a schedule and kind of set up as a quote unquote trigger to then, notify a rep that something happened and now would be a good time to reach out. That's kind of the more manual workflow, but long-term, you could even have this fully automated with a sequencer where as signals are happening, you're reaching out kind of automatically with relevant personalization. One thing that I like to talk about signals is, and how it pertains to Clay is, I think signals are like very popular right now, and to the point where it can sometimes almost become noise. And it's like we have all these signals, we're just kind of throwing them at reps, and they're not really doing much with them. One way that I've seen companies really like cut through the noise and be more successful there is create a signal score, or like a quote unquote smoke report. And essentially it's the same way you'd score an account based on certain criteria for like a lead score, maybe different weighted point system, what have you, but apply that to non-static data points. So maybe a CISO hire is 1 point, a security breach is another 1-2 points, whatever you want. And now I'm summing these up to a total signal score, or like a smoke report. And now I can use that number, that score, as like a threshold to trigger something. So that way I'm still creating this trigger-based system, but I'm not relying on one signal that could just be noise. And I'm also not sending a bunch of signals to reps and expecting them to sort through it. I'm really kind of making sense of it for them, aggregating it, and then only surfacing the kind of most important personalization points that they would need. All right. I'll show one last thing because I know we're kind of coming up on time here. Clay doesn't stop at the companies. We could pull a list of contacts here by buyer persona. So these are like enterprise security leads. We're enriching their work email with a waterfall. We're validating that email to ensure it's deliverable. We could do the same thing with mobile phone as well. So it's really an end-to-end way to get company data and signals and information on who will ultimately be like the decision makers at your company and orchestrate this all back to your CRM. So that's it from the demo. I'll kick it back to Everett for any sort of Q&A and remaining questions from the audience.
Awesome. Thanks, Andrew. Appreciate it. Yeah, amazing. So we got a bunch of questions, as you could probably imagine. A couple in the Q&A, in particular, Jane, if you could put in the chat, I didn't see when that one came through, your question about, can you only do this if a company is public versus private? If you could let us know what you were talking about and when you were talking about that, we'd be happy to answer that. It just didn't pop through. It looked like there was some kind of a tech glitch there. Moving on, Elsa Mann asks, for the competitive analysis with Clay, how large do the competitors have to be?
Cool. I can help with some of these questions. So I'll start with
James.
Jane's. Oh, sorry, Everett, do you want to go?
Nope. Still with us, Everett?
Yeah, I can take the competitive one, and then Andrew, I'll let you chime in on the rest. But maybe not.
Do you want me to take this, Everett? All right,
we're losing him. Yeah, you're up there.
Let me take it over. So for Jane's question, can you do this if a company is public versus privately held? We have data providers that are specifically for private company information, funding, news, etc. Now, am I going to tell you that the same level of information is available for private companies as public companies? Frankly, no. I mean, there's, public companies do SEC filings, public reports, earnings calls, etc. So there will be more information, but there's still information out there with private companies beyond just like the data providers we have that's publicly available on the internet. Think of when a company fundraises, they'll usually create a blog post, an article, maybe Forbes writes a snippet, TechCrunch, etc. So these are all still in the public domain and scrapable with AI. So there is more information out there. And oftentimes there's less noise to sort through as well. So the information you do get is a little bit more pointed and easily actionable than companies in the public domain where there's just so much information. It can sometimes be almost the opposite challenge.
Awesome. And Andrew, if you could stop sharing your screen as per Kaya. All good. We're going to throw a poll up there, guys. So make sure you fill that out. Amazing. Okay. Next up, Elsa, sharing this again. For the competitive analysis with Clay, how large do the competitors have to be in order to be found, or what criteria is required for the competitor to be found?
I don't know if Elsa, you could chime in with a little bit more detail here, but is your question around like if I'm a company and I want to like find competitive tech or like customers that have my tech, or I want to find my customers' competitors? If you could just like add a little bit of color on where you're going with that question, that would be helpful.
And in the meantime, Brendan asks, how does Clay decide which data sources to use? And on top of that, are folks able to choose the data sources? And I believe we might have answered that after that question was asked.
Yeah. So we essentially do our own internal benchmarking on accuracy, coverage, etc., and we'll organize the waterfall as such. So I would say the default waterfall setup is organized bang for your buck effectively. However, if you find that not to be the case, you can see exactly where the data is coming from, which provider in the waterfall found it, and you can rearrange the waterfall accordingly. So you're always in the driver's seat with kind of moving around the different providers as you get feedback or results from your team.
Heck yeah. And then Elsa did mention, yes, trying to find what competitive tech or prospects are using. For example, for a competitive takedown campaign.
Yeah, I mean, I think a similar idea with the previous question about private versus public. It's, the bigger the company, the more information is going to be there. HG Insights definitely, like, I would say, excels in more of the mid-market to enterprise space. So I would say once you get more into mid-market, it becomes easier to identify technology. However, depending on the technology, it also can live on their website, and you can use things like built with, scraping, other providers as well to actually just like directly visit their website site and find embedded technologies. So that's a little more agnostic to segment.
Awesome. Awesome. We've got about 37 seconds here. Amazing to have you guys on here. I really appreciate all you guys. Both of you guys, all you guys, whatever. I'm going to copy all these questions out and make sure you guys get those. We just got another one as well. So let me do that and we can get all those answered. And I'm sure folks will have questions for you. Where do we reach you guys? LinkedIn best for you?
LinkedIn is great. I can put mine in the chat.
Amazing. Well, thanks again, everybody, for A, joining, and B, joining us so vivaciously with all your great questions. Like I mentioned, I'll get these into Slack so we all have them. We all can see the answers to them. If you're not a Clay user, definitely give them a shot. I personally haven't used them in a while, and I was super excited to see all the improvements over the past 6 months since I've last touched you guys. So looking forward to diving back in. Thanks, guys. Thanks, everyone on the call. On to the next session. See you guys.